My name is Marcus Rivera, and for 3 years, I lived 2 lives at Riverside Community College. By day, I was nobody, just another face in crowded hallways, sitting in the back of classrooms, keeping my head down. By night, I was the ghost who cleaned those same hallways, emptying trash cans filled with discarded dreams and wiping down whiteboards covered in equations I understood better than most of the students who wrote them. I wasn't supposed to be in college at all. At 25, I was supposed to have my life figured out, but life had other plans. When my father's construction business collapsed during the recession, I dropped out of my engineering program at State to help support my family. The plan was temporary, just a year to get back on our feet. That was 4 years ago. Now I worked the graveyard shift as a custodian at Riverside CC, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Monday through Friday. The pay was decent enough to keep me and my younger sister Elena afloat while she finished high school. During the day, I took whatever classes I could afford, usually just 1 per semester, paying out of pocket, slowly chipping away at my degree 1 credit at a time. Most nights, the college was peaceful. I'd listen to podcasts while mopping floors, sometimes MIT OpenCourseWare lectures on calculus or physics. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was literally cleaning up after an education I couldn't fully access myself. The trouble started with Dr. Amanda Whitfield. Dr. Whitfield taught advanced calculus and was the department chair for mathematics. She was in her early 50s, with perfectly styled silver hair and an air of academic superiority that preceded her into every room. Her office walls were covered with degrees from prestigious universities, and she made sure everyone knew about her published papers and conference presentations. I first encountered her on a Tuesday night in September. I was cleaning the math building around 2 a.m. when I noticed her office light was still on. Through the glass door, I could see her hunched over papers, red pen in hand, looking frustrated. "Excuse me," she called out as I passed. "Could you empty my wastebasket and be quiet about it? I'm trying to concentrate." I nodded and quietly emptied her trash. As I worked, I couldn't help but notice the papers scattered across her desk. They were student submissions for a calculus problem set, and from what I could see, most of the work was wrong. Not just wrong, but fundamentally misunderstanding the concept. "Idiots," she muttered under her breath. "How do they expect to pass when they can't even grasp basic optimization?" I glanced at the problem she was grading. It was a classic Lagrange multipliers problem, finding the maximum volume of a box with constrained surface area. The student had set up the equations correctly, but made an error in the partial derivatives. Without thinking, I said quietly, "The student forgot to apply the product rule in the second constraint." Dr. Whitfield looked up sharply. "Excuse me." My face flushed. "Sorry, I noticed the student's work. They set up the Lagrangian correctly, but when they took the partial derivative with respect to y, they treated xi as a constant instead of applying the product rule." She stared at me for a long moment, then at the paper, then back at me. "You're the janitor." "Yes, ma'am. I'm also a part-time student here." "And you think you understand calculus?" "I'm currently taking your colleague Professor Martinez's Calculus E class." Dr. Whitfield's expression shifted from surprise to something colder. "Well, Mr. Rivera, Marcus Rivera. Mr. Rivera, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I don't need a custodian telling me how to grade papers. Perhaps you should focus on your mopping and leave the mathematics to those of us with actual qualifications." Her tone was ice-cold, dismissive. I felt my face burn with embarrassment. "Of course. Sorry to bother you." As I left her office, I heard her mutter, "Unbelievable. Now the help thinks they're mathematicians." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed some invisible line. But I also couldn't shake the fact that I'd been right about that problem. And Dr. Whitfield's reaction told me everything I needed to know about what she thought of people like me. I should have left it alone. But sometimes, when you've been invisible for too long, being seen, even negatively, feels like progress. I had no idea how wrong I was. 2 weeks later, I was in Dr. Whitfield's advanced calculus class. I'd managed to save enough to add it to my course load, and despite our awkward encounter, I needed the credit. The class was small, only 15 students, and I recognized most of them as full-time students who drove nice cars and complained about having to buy textbooks. I sat in the back corner, same as always, with my second-hand textbook and a notebook I'd been using for 3 semesters. Dr. Whitfield entered precisely at 10 a.m., her heels clicking authoritatively on the linoleum floor. "Today we're covering optimization problems using Lagrange multipliers," she announced, writing the topic on the whiteboard. "I trust you've all done the reading." She launched into the lecture, explaining the method with the kind of practiced precision that suggested she'd given this exact talk hundreds of times. When she reached the example problem, coincidentally, the same type I'd seen her grading that night, she paused. "Now, who can tell me the first step in setting up the Lagrangian?" A few hands went up. She called on Jessica, a blonde girl in the front row who always had the right answers. "You identify the objective function and the constraint functions," Jessica replied confidently. "Correct. And then?" The lesson continued normally until she reached the differentiation step. She wrote out the partial derivatives on the board, but made the same error I'd seen in that student's work, treating a variable as a constant. My hand went up before I could stop myself. Dr. Whitfield's eyes found mine, and I saw a flash of recognition. "Yes, Mr. Rivera. I think there might be an error in the second partial derivative." The classroom went dead silent. You could hear the HVAC system humming. "I beg your pardon?" My mouth felt dry, but I pressed on. "When you took the partial derivative of xi with respect to y, you wrote x. But since both x and I are variables in our constraint, shouldn't it be x times the partial of y with respect to I, which is just x?" A few students turned to look at me. Dr. Whitfield's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mr. Rivera, are you suggesting that I've made an error?" I think the product rule applies here." She walked slowly to the back of the classroom, stopping at my desk. "Mr. Rivera, remind the class what your major is." I'm still working on general education requirements." "I see. And what's your background in advanced mathematics?" My face was burning. "I'm teaching myself mostly. Online lectures, textbooks. Teaching yourself." She said it like the words tasted bad. "And you believe your self-taught understanding supersedes my PhD in mathematics from Cornell?" A few students chuckled. I wanted to disappear. "No, ma'am. I just thought." "Mr. Rivera, let me be very clear about something. This is an advanced calculus course, not a basic algebra review. If you're struggling with the fundamental concepts, perhaps you should consider taking some prerequisite courses before attempting material at this level." She walked back to the front of the classroom. "Now, as I was saying before the interruption, but here's the thing, I was right, and I knew I was right." As she continued the problem with her incorrect derivative, she got a nonsensical answer. A negative volume for the optimized box. She paused, staring at the board. "Well," she said finally, "this is clearly a typo in my notes. We'll finish this problem next class, when I've had a chance to review my materials." After class, as students filed out, I heard whispers. "Did you see that guy try to correct her? So embarrassing. Imagine thinking you know better than Dr. Whitfield. Isn't he the janitor? My friend saw him mopping the halls." That last comment stopped me cold. I looked around and saw several students staring at me with a mixture of amusement and disgust. My cover was blown. As I packed my notebook, Dr. Whitfield approached my desk. "Mr. Rivera, a word of advice. In academic settings, it's important to know your place. I understand that working-class students sometimes feel the need to overcompensate, but disrupting my lectures with half-baked theories isn't helping anyone." But the derivative was wrong. Mr. Rivera. Her voice cut through mine like a blade. You're a part-time student who mops floors for a living. I'm a tenured professor with 20 years of experience. Do you really think you're in a position to question my expertise? I stood there, speechless, as she walked away. Around me, the last few students were gathering their things, some still shooting glances in my direction. That afternoon, I double-checked my work in the library. I pulled out 3 different calculus textbooks and verified the product rule applications. I was right. Dr. Whitfield had made an error, and then humiliated me for pointing it out. But being right wasn't enough. In her classroom, her word was law, and I was just the help who'd forgotten his place. I should have dropped the class right then. Should have taken my financial aid refund and walked away. Instead, I decided to prove that the janitor knew more than the professor thought. Another mistake. Dr. Whitfield's campaign against me started subtly. At first, I thought I was being paranoid, reading too much into normal academic interactions. But as the weeks progressed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. In the next class, she randomly called on me to solve a particularly complex problem at the board. When I solved it correctly, which I did, she found fault with my notation. Mr. Rivera, while your answer is technically correct, your presentation lacks the rigor we expect at this level. Please see me after class to discuss proper mathematical writing. After class, she handed me a style guide that was 30 pages long. I expect all future work to follow these conventions exactly, she said. No exceptions. I noticed that none of the other students received the style guide. The next week, she announced that she was implementing a new participation policy. Class participation will now count for 20% of your grade. I'll be looking for thoughtful contributions to discussions, not just correct answers. Every time I raised my hand after that, she either ignored me or acknowledged me with barely concealed irritation. Yes, Mr. Rivera, you have something to add. The way she said my name made it sound like a disease. Meanwhile, she praised other students for contributions that were often less insightful than what I was trying to share. Jessica could ask the most basic question and receive encouraging, "Excellent thinking, Jessica." That's exactly the kind of analytical approach we need. But the real poison came through gossip. I started noticing how conversations would stop when I entered the math building during my day classes. One afternoon, I overheard 2 students talking near the vending machines. Dr. Whitfield said she's never seen such a clear case of academic overreach. What do you mean? This janitor guy in her calc class. Apparently, he thinks he knows better than she does. She said it's a perfect example of how allowing unqualified students into advanced courses dilutes the academic standards. Isn't that discrimination or something? How can it be discrimination? She's not saying he can't be here because he's a janitor. She's saying he lacks the foundational knowledge for the coursework. There's a difference. I felt sick. Dr. Whitfield was using my job, my background, my very existence as a cautionary tale. The whisper campaign spread beyond just her students. Professor Martinez, who taught my calculus EA class, pulled me aside after a lecture. "Marcus, I wanted to check in with you. I heard you were having some difficulties in Dr. Whitfield's advanced class." Difficulties. She mentioned that you might be struggling with the pace. She was wondering if perhaps you'd enrolled prematurely before completing all the prerequisites. I felt my hands clench into fists. "Professor Martinez, I completed Calculus I with an A. My work in your Calculus UI class is solid. What prerequisites is she referring to?" He looked uncomfortable. She didn't specify. She's concerned about your academic preparation. Maybe you should consider taking some additional foundational courses. That night, during my custodial shift, I was cleaning the math faculty lounge when I heard voices from the adjacent conference room. The door was slightly ajar, and I recognized Dr. Whitfield's voice immediately. "I'm telling you, it's becoming a real problem. He challenges everything I say in class, disrupts the learning environment for serious students." But is his work actually poor? That was Professor Martinez's voice. That's not the point, David. This is about maintaining academic standards. We can't have working-class students thinking they can waltz into advanced mathematics just because they watch YouTube videos in their spare time. Amanda, that seems a bit what? Elitist? David, there's a reason we have prerequisites, admission standards, academic rigor. When we start making exceptions for feel-good stories about janitors who dream of being mathematicians, we compromise the integrity of the program. Another voice joined in, Dr. Patricia Hendricks from the physics department. I had a similar situation last year. A student who thought watching Neil deGrasse Tyson make him qualified for advanced theoretical physics. Sometimes compassion means helping people understand their limitations. Exactly, Dr. Whitfield said. I'm not being cruel. I'm being realistic. This Rivera character would be much better served in a trade program or maybe basic business math. But advanced calculus, he's going to struggle, fail, and waste everyone's time in the process. I stood frozen in the hallway, mop in hand, listening to 3 professors discuss my academic future like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person with potential. That's when I realized that Dr. Whitfield wasn't just targeting me in class. She was systematically working to undermine my reputation throughout the entire department. Every interaction, every comment, every concern about my academic preparation was part of a larger strategy to push me out. The next morning, I went to the registrar's office and requested my academic transcript. My GPA was 3.8. I had never failed a class, never received below a B+, and had actually been on the dean's list for academic achievement the previous semester. But none of that mattered if the faculty had already decided I didn't belong. That afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of backing down or transferring to another class, I was going to document everything. Every slight, every unfair treatment, every attempt to undermine my academic standing. Dr. Whitfield wanted to make me an example. Fine. I was going to make myself an example she'd never forget. The trap was set during the midterm exam review session. Dr. Whitfield announced it casually at the end of class. I'll be holding an optional review session this Friday at 2 p.m. for anyone who wants additional preparation for next week's midterm. Friday at 2 p.m. was right in the middle of my work shift at the campus maintenance department. I approached her after class. Dr. Whitfield, would it be possible to record the review session? I have to work Friday afternoon, but I'd really like to review the material. She looked at me with that familiar expression of barely concealed disdain. Mr. Rivera, attendance at the review session is optional. If you choose to prioritize your employment over your education, that's your decision. But I need both. I need the job to pay for school. Many students work, Mr. Rivera. They find ways to manage their time effectively. She gathered her papers with deliberate slowness. Perhaps this is another indication that you're not quite ready for the demands of advanced coursework. I stood there, watching her pack up, feeling that familiar burn of injustice in my chest. Could I at least get a copy of the materials you'll be covering? The review session is for active participation, not passive consumption. Students ask questions, work through problems together. It's not something that translates to written materials. She was lying, and we both knew it. Review sessions always involved handouts, practice problems, and specific exam strategies. She just didn't want me to have access to them. That Friday, I tried everything. I asked my supervisor if I could switch shifts. Denied. We were short-staffed. I asked a classmate, Jessica, if she could share notes from the session. Oh, I don't think Dr. Whitfield would want me sharing that material, Jessica said, not meeting my eyes. She made it pretty clear that the review was for people who could actually attend. When Monday came, I walked into class hoping I was wrong about what had happened. I wasn't. The midterm exam was full of problems that looked almost identical to ones I'd never seen before, problems that had clearly been covered in the review session. The formats were different from our homework assignments. The approach was more advanced than what we covered in regular class time. I did my best, drawing on my knowledge from textbooks and online resources, but I knew I was at a severe disadvantage. When I handed in my exam, Dr. Whitfield gave me a look that said, "This is what happens when you can't keep up." The results came back the following Wednesday. I got a 67, a D+. My first failing grade in 3 years of college. But here's what made it worse. Dr. Whitfield announced the grade distribution to the class. Overall, the class performed adequately, with scores ranging from 43 to 96. The median was 78, which suggests most of you came prepared. She paused, looking directly at me. However, I am concerned about a few students who seem to be struggling with the fundamental concepts. If you scored below 70, please see me during office hours to discuss whether this course is appropriate for your current skill level. I was one of 3 students who scored below 70. The other 2 were traditional-age students who'd been partying more than studying. But they wouldn't be questioned about their skill level or academic preparation. They get tutoring recommendations and study group suggestions. I would get a lecture about knowing my place. That afternoon, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to decide whether to go to her office hours or just drop the class. My phone buzzed with a text from Alina. "How did your midterm go? I know you've been studying super hard." My sister was a senior in high school, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working weekends at a local restaurant to help with expenses. She looked up to me, called me her role model for persevering through college despite the challenges. What was I supposed to tell her? That her role model was being slowly destroyed by a professor who thought people like us didn't deserve to be in advanced classes. I got out of the car and walked to Dr. Whitfield's office. She was waiting for me, my exam already pulled from the stack on her desk. "Mr. Rivera, thank you for coming. Please sit down." I sat, feeling like a defendant awaiting sentencing. "I've been reviewing your exam, and I'm afraid we need to have a serious conversation about your academic trajectory." She opened my exam to the first page, where I'd missed a problem about related rates. This is a fundamental calculus concept that should be second nature at this level. The fact that you're struggling with it suggests that you may have gaps in your foundational knowledge. "I understand the concept," I said quietly. "I think I just misread the problem setup." "Mr. Rivera, this isn't about one problem. Your overall performance suggests a pattern." She flipped through the pages, pointing to various points lost. "Incomplete integration here, improper application of the chain rule there, unclear notation throughout." Every criticism was technically valid, but she was applying a standard to my work that I'd never seen her apply to other students. When Jessica made similar errors on homework, they were learning opportunities. When I made them, they were evidence of my inadequacy. "I think," Dr. Whitfield continued, "it would be in your best interest to withdraw from this course and take some time to strengthen your mathematical foundation. Perhaps retake Calculus I and U. Make sure you have the prerequisite knowledge firmly in place." I already took Calculus I and U. Advice in both. Grades in lower-level courses don't always translate to success in advanced work, she said smoothly. Sometimes the most compassionate thing an educator can do is help a student recognize their limitations before they invest too much time and money in an unsuitable path. I stared at her, feeling something crack inside my chest. "You want me to drop out? I want you to be realistic about your capabilities and make informed decisions about your education. Because I'm a janitor." Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Rivera, your employment status has nothing to do with my academic assessment of your work. Doesn't it?" The question hung in the air between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Dr. Whitfield closed my exam and placed it in front of me. "You have until Friday to decide whether to withdraw with a W or continue and likely receive a failing grade. I'll leave that choice up to you. I picked up my exam and stood up. As I reached the door, she called after me. Mr. Rivera, for what it's worth, there's no shame in recognizing that not everyone is cut out for advanced mathematics. The world needs janitors too. I walked out of her office with my hands shaking and my vision blurred with rage. Not just at her words, but at the system that allowed someone in a position of power to systematically destroy a student's confidence and future based on nothing more than class prejudice. That night, I made a decision that terrified me. I wasn't going to drop the class. I was going to document everything Dr. Whitfield had done, find evidence of her discriminatory treatment, and file a formal complaint. But first, I was going to ace her final exam so thoroughly that she'd never be able to question my mathematical abilities again. The war had begun. I spent the weekend transforming my studio apartment into a command center. I spread out every piece of paper from Dr. Whitfield's class across my small dining table. Syllabi, handouts, graded homework, email communications, and my detailed notes from every class session. In a separate notebook, I began documenting every interaction I'd had with her, trying to recall exact quotes and specific incidents. But documentation wasn't enough. I needed evidence and I needed allies. Monday morning, I went to the campus library and researched Riverside Community College's academic policies. What I found was enlightening. Buried in the faculty handbook was a clear anti-discrimination policy that included protections based on socioeconomic status. More importantly, there was a specific provision about academic bullying, defined as using grading or classroom authority to intimidate students based on non-academic factors. I also discovered something else. Other students had filed complaints about Dr. Whitfield before. Using the library's database access, I searched through student newspaper archives and found 2 articles from previous years. One was about a grade dispute involving a veteran student who claimed he'd been treated unfairly in Dr. Whitfield's statistics course. Another mentioned a Title EX complaint filed by a female student who alleged that Dr. Whitfield had created a hostile learning environment. Both complaints had been dismissed by the administration, but the pattern was there. My next step was gathering current evidence. I downloaded a voice recording app on my phone and began recording every class session. California was a 2-party consent state, but the recording was for my own notes and protection. I wasn't planning to publish or distribute the audio without permission. I also started reaching out to other students carefully. During lunch, I approached Miguel Santos, one of the other students who'd scored below 70 on the midterm. He was a 20-year-old kid from East La, first in his family to attend college. "Hey Miguel, how are you feeling about the calc class?" He looked around nervously. "Man, I don't know. Dr. Whitfield thinks I should drop." "She told you that too?" "Yeah, during office hours. Said maybe I should consider switching majors, that mathematics might not be my strength." He lowered his voice. "But Jude, I aced calculus last semester, and I'm killing it in my other math class with Professor Thompson. It's just Whitfield's class where I'm struggling. Have you noticed anything weird about how she treats different students?" Miguel's eyes sharpened. "You mean like how Jessica can ask the dumbest questions and get praised, but when we ask questions, we get lectures about academic preparation?" I'd found my first ally. Over the next week, I quietly reached out to 3 other students who seemed to be having similar experiences. There was Maria Gonzalez, a single mother returning to school after 10 years. Kevin Wright, a former military guy using his GI benefits. And surprisingly, David Park, an Asian American student who was on academic scholarship. What I discovered was that Dr. Whitfield's bias wasn't just about economic class. It was about who she thought belonged in advanced mathematics. Her favored students were predominantly white, from middle to upper class backgrounds, with traditional academic paths. Everyone else faced subtle but persistent discouragement. David was the most hesitant to talk. "Look, I don't want to make waves," he said. I need good letters of recommendation for graduate school. But yeah, she's definitely harder on some students than others. Would you be willing to document what you've observed? Document it how? I explained my plan. I was building a comprehensive case showing a pattern of discriminatory treatment. I needed witnesses who could corroborate specific incidents and provide examples of differential treatment. I'm not asking anyone to go on record yet, I said. Just start keeping notes. Dates, times, what was said. If this turns into something official, having multiple perspectives will be crucial. That Wednesday, I got my break. Dr. Whitfield was returning our latest homework assignment, and I noticed she was spending an unusually long time reviewing each paper before handing it back. When she got to mine, she paused. "Mr. Rivera, please see me after class." After everyone left, she held up my homework. I'd solved all the problems correctly, shown my work clearly, and followed her formatting requirements exactly. "Your work is technically correct," she began, "but I'm concerned about the level of assistance you might be receiving." My blood ran cold. Assistance. These solutions are quite sophisticated for someone with your background. The approach to problem 7, in particular, uses techniques that one covered in our class discussions. I stared at her. Problem 7 was a complex integration that required substitution followed by integration by parts. I'd solved it using a technique I'd learned from watching a Khan Academy video. I studied additional resources to make sure I understood the material fully. What resources? Online tutorials, additional textbooks from the library, practice problems from other calculus books. She set down my paper. "Mr. Rivera, academic integrity is fundamental to this institution. If you're receiving inappropriate assistance, whether from tutors, online solution sites, or other students, that constitutes academic dishonesty. Are you accusing me of cheating? I'm expressing concern about the disparity between your exam performance and your homework quality." This was it. This was her endgame. She couldn't break me down with criticism and humiliation, so now she was questioning my academic integrity. If she could make cheating allegations stick, she could have me removed from the class and potentially expelled from the college. But I was ready for this. "Dr. Whitfield, I'd be happy to redo any of these problems in your office, right now, to demonstrate my understanding." She blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "Or," I continued, "if you have concerns about academic dishonesty, I think this should be handled through the proper channels. I'd welcome an official review of my work by the Academic Integrity Committee." I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar app. I believe I'm entitled to have a student advocate present for any formal accusations. Should I schedule a meeting with the Dean of Students? Her expression hardened. "That won't be necessary. I'm simply encouraging you to rely on your own understanding rather than external assistance." "I understand. And I'm simply asking for clarification about what constitutes appropriate study methods versus academic dishonesty. I'd hate for there to be any confusion about the college's policies." She handed me back my homework without another word. That night, I sat in my apartment reviewing the recording from our conversation. She hadn't quite made a formal accusation, but she'd laid the groundwork. More importantly, I demonstrated that I wasn't going to be intimidated by threats of academic misconduct charges. I was learning to fight back, but I was also learning how dangerous this game was. Dr. Whitfield had the power to destroy my academic career with a few well-placed accusations. I had the truth and growing evidence of her discriminatory behavior. The question was, which would prove stronger when this finally came to a head? I was about to find out. The recording from my conversation with Dr. Whitfield about academic assistance became the centerpiece of my growing evidence file. But I needed more than one incident to prove a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Over the next 3 weeks, I methodically documented everything while quietly building a network of student witnesses. The breakthrough came during a regular class session in early November. Dr. Whitfield was discussing applications of integration when Kevin Wright, the veteran student asked a question about using calculus in engineering contexts. "That's an interesting practical application, Kevin," she said warmly. "It's refreshing to have students who can connect mathematical concepts to real-world problems." 10 minutes later, when Miguel asked a similar question about using integration in economics, is intended major, her response was completely different. "Mr. Santos, let's focus on mastering the mathematical foundations before we worry about applications. You need to walk before you can run." The difference in tone and content was stark. Kevin's question was praised as showing intellectual curiosity. Miguel's was dismissed as premature. I caught it all on my phone's voice recorder. After class, I approached Kevin privately. "Did you notice the difference in how she responded to your question versus Miguel's?" Kevin, a straight-talking guy in his 30s, didn't hesitate. "Hell yes, I noticed. That was some bullshit. Miguel's question was actually more sophisticated than mine. Would you be willing to talk about what you've observed in her class?" That afternoon, Kevin, Miguel, Maria, and I met at a coffee shop off campus. David Park joined us reluctantly, still worried about potential repercussions. "Look," Kevin said, "I've dealt with discrimination before, in the military, in the workplace. I know what it looks like. And Whitfield is definitely targeting certain students." Maria nodded. "She told me last week that maybe I should consider more practical math courses, like business math or statistics for non-majors. When I said I was planning to transfer to a 4-year university for accounting, she said I should be realistic about my academic trajectory." David finally spoke up. "She's never directly said anything discriminatory to me, but I've noticed the pattern. Students like Jessica and Bradley get encouragement and extra help. Students like us get lectures about our limitations." I shared what I'd documented so far: the unfair grading standards, the lack of access to review sessions, the veiled accusations of academic dishonesty, and the systematic discouragement from continuing in mathematics. "The problem is," I said, "most of this is subtle. She's too smart to make explicitly discriminatory statements. It's all about tone, differential treatment, and creating a hostile environment for students she doesn't think belong there." Kevin leaned forward. "So what's the plan?" I had been thinking about this for weeks. "We document everything for the rest of the semester. Every interaction, every graded assignment, every class discussion. We need to show a clear pattern that can't be dismissed as isolated incidents or misunderstandings." "And then what?" Maria asked. "Then we file a formal complaint with the college administration." David looked nervous. "What if it backfires? What if she retaliates?" "She's already retaliating," I said. "The question is whether we let her continue doing this to future students, or we hold her accountable." Over the next 2 weeks, our informal group became a documentation machine. We shared notes after every class, compared grading feedback, and recorded specific incidents. The evidence was overwhelming. Dr. Whitfield consistently called on favored students for easy questions and targeted students like us for more difficult problems. When favored students made errors, they received gentle correction and encouragement. When we made similar errors, we got lectures about academic preparation. Grading standards varied significantly. I found nearly identical homework solutions that received different grades based on who submitted them. Office hours were effectively segregated. Favored students received extended help and mentoring, while students like us were rushed through perfunctory meetings. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. I was cleaning the faculty conference room one night when I found a piece of paper that had fallen behind the radiator. It was a printout of an email thread between Dr. Whitfield and 2 other faculty members. The subject line was "Maintaining Academic Standards." The email was Dr. Whitfield's response to a question about declining enrollment in advanced math courses. I've been more selective about encouraging students to continue in advanced mathematics. Too often, we allow students into higher-level courses because of misplaced compassion rather than genuine academic merit. Working-class students, in particular, sometimes mistake determination for ability. While I admire their work ethic, advanced mathematics requires a level of abstract thinking that isn't developed through life experience alone. By gently steering these students toward more appropriate courses, we maintain the rigor that makes our program respected, while helping them avoid inevitable failure and disappointment. I stared at the paper in disbelief. She had actually written down her discriminatory philosophy. This wasn't about academic standards. It was about class prejudice disguised as educational policy. I photographed the email with my phone, my hands shaking with excitement and rage. This was the smoking gun that would expose her systematic bias. The next day, I called a meeting with my group. "I found something," I said, sliding a printout of the email across the table. Kevin read it first, his face darkening. "Holy shit. She actually wrote this down." "This is it," Maria said. "This proves everything we've been documenting." David was quiet for a long moment. "This is serious," David said finally. "This isn't just bad teaching. This is systematic discrimination based on socioeconomic status." "The question is," I said, "what do we do with it?" Kevin was still staring at the email. "We take this to the administration. Today." "Hold on," Maria said. "We need to be strategic about this. If we go in half-cocked, they might dismiss it as disgruntled students making accusations." She was right. I'd been researching the college's complaint process, and I knew we'd only get one shot at this. If the administration could dismiss our complaint as unfounded or retaliatory, Dr. Whitfield would continue her discriminatory practices, and probably target us even more aggressively. "We need to present this as part of a comprehensive pattern," I said. "The email is powerful, but it needs context. We need to show that this philosophy translated into specific discriminatory actions in the classroom." Over the weekend, we compiled everything into a detailed report. I organized it chronologically, starting with my first encounter with Dr. Whitfield in her office, and documenting every incident through the present. Each allegation was supported by specific evidence: recorded conversations, graded assignments, email communications, and witness statements. The report was 15 pages long and included evidence of differential grading standards, documentation of classroom discrimination, records of intimidation and academic bullying, the smoking gun email about maintaining academic standards, witness statements from 4 students corroborating the pattern of behavior on Monday morning. I made an appointment with Dr. Robert Martinez, the Dean of Student Affairs. I didn't mention the specific nature of my complaint, just that I needed to discuss academic concerns in one of my courses. Tuesday at 2 p.m., I sat in Dean Martinez's office with a folder containing copies of all our evidence. He was a soft-spoken man in his 50s, with graying hair and the kind of patient demeanor that suggested he'd heard every possible student complaint. "Mr. Rivera, what can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath. "I need to file a formal complaint about discriminatory treatment in Dr. Whitfield's advanced calculus course." His expression became more serious. "That's a significant allegation. Can you tell me more about the nature of the discrimination you believe you've experienced?" I handed him the report. "I think this will explain the situation more thoroughly than I can summarize verbally." For the next 20 minutes, D. Martinez read through the documentation in silence. I watched his expression change as he progressed through the evidence, from polite attention to genuine concern to what looked like anger when he reached the email. Finally, he looked up. "Mr. Rivera, this is very thorough documentation. These are serious allegations." "Yes, sir. And I want to be clear, this isn't just about me. Dr. Whitfield is systematically discouraging students from underrepresented backgrounds from continuing in mathematics. It's affecting multiple students, and it's going to continue affecting future students unless something is done. You mentioned that other students have experienced similar treatment. Are they willing to participate in a formal investigation?" "Yes, sir. 4 other students have agreed to provide statements and participate in any investigation process." D. Martinez leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Rivera, I need to ask you some direct questions. Is this complaint motivated by your academic performance in Dr. Whitfield's class? Are you seeking to have grades changed or assignments reconsidered? I had expected this question. Dean Martinez, my complaint isn't about my grades. It's about Dr. Whitfield's systematic bias against students she doesn't believe belong in advanced mathematics. Even if she changed every grade I've received, that wouldn't address the fundamental problem of discrimination against future students. He nodded slowly. And this email, where did you obtain this? I had prepared for this question too, but it was still delicate. I found it in a faculty area during my work shift. It had been discarded, and I recognized Dr. Whitfield's name. You work for the college? Yes, sir. I'm part of the custodial staff. Night shift. Something shifted in his expression. Not negative, but a deeper understanding of the complexity of my situation. Mr. Rivera, I want you to know that I take these allegations very seriously. Based on what you've presented, I'm going to initiate a formal investigation. This will involve interviews with you, the other students you've mentioned, Dr. Whitfield, and potentially other faculty members. What happens during the investigation? Dr. Whitfield will be notified that a complaint has been filed. She'll have the opportunity to respond to the specific allegations. The investigation committee will review all evidence and interview all relevant parties. Depending on their findings, consequences could range from additional training to formal censure to termination. He paused. I also want to warn you that this process can be difficult. Dr. Whitfield will likely deny the allegations, and she may claim that this complaint is retaliatory or motivated by poor academic performance. Are you prepared for that? Yes, sir. The other students and I have discussed this extensively. We understand the risks, but we believe this needs to be addressed. Dean Martinez stood up and extended his hand. Mr. Rivera, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Regardless of the investigation's outcome, you've shown considerable courage in documenting and reporting behavior that goes against everything this institution stands for. As I walked out of his office, I felt a mixture of relief and terror. The complaint was filed, the investigation would begin, and there was no going back. That evening, I called my sister Elena to tell her what I'd done. Marcus, are you sure about this? What if they don't believe you? What if you get kicked out of school? Elena, there are some things more important than protecting yourself. If I don't stand up to this, she's going to keep destroying other students who look like us, who come from families like ours. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. Mom would be proud too. That night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow, Dr. Whitfield would be notified of the complaint. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. The email arrived at 6:23 a.m. on Wednesday. Dr. Whitfield has been notified of the formal complaint. Please refrain from any direct communication with her regarding this matter. The investigation committee will contact you within 48 hours to schedule your formal interview. Dean Martinez, I stared at my phone in bed, knowing that across town, Dr. Whitfield was probably reading a similar message. The thought made my stomach churn, but there was no turning back now. That morning's calculus class was surreal. Dr. Whitfield walked in with her usual composed demeanor, but I caught her eyes scanning the room more carefully than usual. When her gaze landed on me, she held it for just a moment longer than normal, not hostile, but calculating. The lecture proceeded normally until about halfway through, when she made an announcement. I want to remind everyone that we're approaching the final weeks of the semester. Anyone who has concerns about their performance or questions about course policies should address them through proper academic channels. Her eyes found mine again. The mathematics department takes academic integrity and proper procedures very seriously. The message was clear. She knew about the complaint, and she was already framing it as improper procedure. After class, Kevin caught up with me in the hallway. Did you feel that tension? She knows. Of course she knows. The question is how she's going to respond. I got my answer the next day. I was called into my supervisor's office at the maintenance department. Janet Morrison was a fair boss who'd always treated me well, but she looked uncomfortable as I sat down. "Marcus, I received a call from Dr. Whitfield yesterday. She expressed some concerns about your work performance in the math building." My heart sank. "What kind of concerns?" "She said she's noticed you in faculty areas after hours, and she's worried about confidentiality issues. She mentioned that you might have access to sensitive academic materials." I kept my voice steady. "Janet, I've never violated any confidentiality policies. I clean the faculty areas as part of my assigned duties. I've never accessed files, computers, or any materials that aren't part of normal custodial work." "I believe you, Marcus, but I have to ask, have you encountered any sensitive documents or information during your shifts?" This was the moment I'd been dreading. If I lied, I could be fired for dishonesty. If I told the truth, Dr. Whitfield could claim I'd violated confidentiality by accessing the email. "Janet, I found a piece of paper that had fallen behind a radiator while I was cleaning. It appeared to be a discarded email. I didn't go looking for it, and I didn't access any systems or files." "Did you keep this paper?" "I photographed it because it contained information relevant to discrimination I was experiencing as a student." Janet sighed. "Marcus, this puts me in a difficult position. Dr. Whitfield is suggesting that you might have used your custodial access inappropriately." "Janet, I've been an exemplary employee for 3 years. I've never had a disciplinary issue, never missed a shift, never had any complaints about my work. This complaint comes one day after I filed an academic grievance against Dr. Whitfield for discriminatory treatment." Janet's expression shifted. "You filed a grievance?" "Yes, with Dean Martinez, about systematic discrimination against students from working-class backgrounds." She was quiet for a long moment. "Marcus, I can't get involved in academic matters, but I can say that your work performance has been excellent. I'm going to document this conversation, but unless there's evidence of actual policy violations, this won't affect your employment." "Thank you, Janet." As I left her office, I realized that Dr. Whitfield's retaliation had begun. She was trying to get me fired from my job, probably hoping that losing my income would force me to drop out of school and abandon the complaint. But she had made a crucial mistake. She had created additional evidence of retaliation. That afternoon, I called Dean Martinez and reported the incident. He took detailed notes and assured me that any employment retaliation would be considered part of the investigation. The formal interview took place the following Monday. The committee consisted of Dean Martinez, Dr. Patricia Rodriguez from the English department, and Dr. James Wilson from the Student Affairs Office. They had reviewed all my documentation in advance. "Mr. Rivera," Dean Martinez began, "please walk us through your experiences in Dr. Whitfield's class, starting from your first interaction with her." For the next 2 hours, I recounted everything. The initial encounter in her office, the classroom humiliation, the unfair grading standards, the missed review session, the veiled accusations of academic dishonesty, and the systematic campaign of discouragement. Dr. Rodriguez asked pointed questions about specific incidents. When Dr. Whitfield suggested you might be receiving inappropriate assistance on homework, did she follow proper academic integrity procedures? No. She made the accusation privately, without offering me any formal due process or the opportunity to have a student advocate present. Dr. Wilson focused on the email I'd found. "Can you explain exactly how you encountered this document?" I explained the circumstances carefully, emphasizing that I hadn't sought out the information and that it was clearly discarded material. "Mr. Rivera," Dean Martinez said, "Dr. Whitfield has provided her response to these allegations. She claims that her concerns about your academic performance are legitimate and based solely on your coursework. She denies any discriminatory intent and suggests that your complaint is motivated by dissatisfaction with your grades." "Dean Martinez, my complaint isn't about my grades. It's about Dr. Whitfield's systematic bias against students she doesn't believe belong in advanced mathematics. The email I found proves that she has an explicit philosophy of steering working-class students away from advanced courses. "We've reviewed that email," Dr. Rodriguez said. "It's certainly concerning language. How do you respond to Dr. Whitfield's claim that she was simply discussing maintaining academic standards?" Academic standards should be applied equally to all students. When a working-class student and a middle-class student make the same error, they should receive the same feedback and the same grade. That's not what's happening in her classroom. The interview concluded with Dr. Wilson explaining the next steps. They would interview the other students who had provided statements, review additional evidence, and conduct a formal interview with Dr. Whitfield. "Mr. Rivera," Dean Martinez said as we finished, "regardless of the outcome of this investigation, I want you to know that you've demonstrated considerable courage in bringing these concerns forward. If even half of what you've documented is accurate, it represents a serious violation of our institution's values." That evening, Miguel called me with disturbing news. "Marcus, Dr. Whitfield asked me to stay after class today. She said she heard I was involved in some sort of complaint and wanted to make sure I understood that my academic success depended on focusing on my coursework rather than outside distractions." "Did she threaten you directly?" "Not directly, but the message was clear. She also said something about how false accusations could reflect poorly on a student's character and follow them to future institutions." I documented Miguel's report and forwarded it to Dean Martinez. Dr. Whitfield was continuing to retaliate, apparently unaware that every action was being monitored and recorded. 3 days later, I received an email that made my heart race. "Mr. Rivera, the investigation committee has completed its preliminary review. Dr. Whitfield has been placed on administrative leave pending the final determination. Your final exam will be administered by Professor Thompson. Please contact my office to schedule a meeting to discuss next steps." Dean Martinez, Dr. Whitfield had been suspended. The investigation was taking my allegations seriously. But I also knew that this was far from over. Administrative leave wasn't termination, and Dr. Whitfield would have every opportunity to defend herself and challenge the findings. The real test was still to come. Would the college administration have the courage to hold a tenured professor accountable for systematic discrimination? I was about to find out whether justice was possible in an institution that had always protected its own. The final exam was scheduled for December 15th at 8 a.m. I arrived 30 minutes early to find Professor Thompson setting up the classroom, a stack of sealed exam booklets on his desk. "Marcus," he said as I entered, "how are you holding up?" "Honestly, I'm terrified. Not about the exam, about what happens after." Professor Thompson nodded. "I want you to know that I've reviewed Dr. Whitfield's course materials and your documentation. What you experienced was not normal academic rigor. It was systematic bias. Other students filtered in, including Miguel, Maria, Kevin, and David. We'd all continued attending class during Dr. Whitfield's suspension, with Professor Thompson covering the final weeks of material. The atmosphere had been completely different, supportive, encouraging, focused on learning rather than proving who belonged. The exam itself was fair and comprehensive, covering exactly the material we'd studied. No surprise problems that required attending special review sessions. No tricks designed to catch students who'd learned from inappropriate sources. Just pure mathematics. As I worked through the problems, I felt a calm confidence I hadn't experienced in Dr. Whitfield's class all semester. These were concepts I understood, techniques I'd mastered through late-night study sessions and determination. For the first time in months, I was being evaluated solely on my mathematical ability. 3 hours later, I handed in my exam knowing I performed well. The final meeting with Dean Martinez was scheduled for December 20th. I walked into his office to find him seated with Dr. Rodriguez and a woman I didn't recognize. Dr. Sarah Kim, the college's vice president for academic affairs. Mr. Rivera, Dean Martinez began, please sit down. We have the final results of our investigation. My heart pounded as Dr. Kim opened a thick folder. After extensive review of the evidence, interviews with all parties, and consultation with external experts on academic discrimination, we have reached our conclusions. She paused, and I held my breath. The investigation committee has found credible evidence of systematic discriminatory treatment based on socioeconomic status. Dr. Whitfield's actions violated multiple college policies regarding equal treatment of students, academic bullying, and professional conduct. I exhaled slowly, hardly believing what I was hearing. Specifically, Dr. Kim continued, we found evidence of differential grading standards applied based on student background rather than academic merit, systematic discouragement of students from underrepresented backgrounds, inappropriate accusations of academic dishonesty, without following proper procedures, retaliation against students who challenged her authority, violation of professional ethics through the explicit philosophy documented in her email communications. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward. Mr. Rivera, we also want to address the retaliation you experienced. Dr. Whitfield's contact with your supervisor was a clear attempt to interfere with your employment in response to your complaint. This behavior is unacceptable and has been documented as part of her disciplinary record. What happens now? I asked. Dr. Whitfield's employment with Riverside Community College has been terminated, Dr. Kim said. She will not be returning to the classroom. Additionally, we are implementing new policies to prevent similar discrimination in the future. Dean Martinez pulled out another document. We're also taking steps to address the academic impact of Dr. Whitfield's discriminatory practices. All students in her classes this semester will have their grades reviewed by an independent committee. Any student who believes their academic record was affected can request a comprehensive review. Furthermore, Dr. Kim added, we're establishing a new oversight process for academic misconduct allegations and implementing mandatory training on bias and discrimination for all faculty members. I sat in stunned silence. Not only had they believed my complaint, they were taking institutional action to prevent future discrimination. Mr. Rivera, Dean Martinez said, there's one more thing. Your final exam in advanced calculus. You scored 94%. Professor Thompson wanted me to tell you personally that your work was exemplary. I felt tears prick my eyes. After months of being told I didn't belong, that I lacked the intellectual capacity for advanced mathematics, I had proven that my abilities were never the problem. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Elena Santos, the new interim chair of the mathematics department. Mr. Rivera, I've been reviewing the situation with Dr. Whitfield's classes. I understand you're planning to transfer to a 4-year university next fall. Yes, ma'am. I'm applying to several engineering programs. I wanted to let you know that the mathematics department will be writing letters of recommendation that specifically address the discrimination you experienced. We want to ensure that your academic record reflects your true abilities, not Dr. Whitfield's biased evaluations. She paused. I also wanted to ask if you'd be interested in tutoring other students in our mathematics program. We're establishing a new peer mentoring system, and we think your perspective and resilience would be valuable to students facing similar challenges. 6 months later, I was accepted to State University's engineering program with a full scholarship. The letter of recommendation from Riverside's mathematics department apparently made a strong impression on the admissions committee. But the most satisfying outcome came in an email from Miguel Santos. Marcus, I wanted you to know that I'm graduating this spring with honors in mathematics. Dr. Santos offered me a position as a student tutor, and I've been accepted to transfer to UC Berkeley for their applied mathematics program. None of this would have happened if you hadn't stood up to Whitfield. You didn't just save your own academic career, you saved mine too. And Maria's and Kevin's, and who knows how many future students who won't have to face that kind of discrimination. The final twist came a year later, when I was a sophomore at State. I received a LinkedIn message from Jessica Morrison, the blonde girl who had been one of Dr. Whitfield's favored students. "Hi Marcus, I hope you remember me from Dr. Whitfield's cult class. I wanted to reach out because I learned about what happened with the investigation. I have to be honest. I knew something was wrong with how she treated certain students, but I was too cowardly to speak up. I benefited from her bias, and I should have said something. I'm sorry it took so much courage from you and the others to hold her accountable. I'm starting my junior year as a math major, and I've been thinking a lot about privilege and responsibility. Thank you for doing what I should have done." I wrote back, "Jessica, thank you for reaching out. The important thing isn't that you were silent then. It's that you're aware now. Use that awareness to make sure you speak up when you see discrimination in the future. That's how we prevent this from happening again." 5 years later, I graduated with my engineering degree and landed a job at a tech company in Silicon Valley. Elena finished high school with a full scholarship to Stanford, inspired partly by seeing her big brother fight for his education and win. Dr. Amanda Whitfield never worked in academia again. According to the Academic Gossip Network, word of her termination for discrimination spread throughout the community college system, making her essentially unhireable. But the real victory wasn't her downfall. It was the institutional changes that followed. Riverside implemented comprehensive bias training, established clear procedures for handling discrimination complaints, and created support systems for students from underrepresented backgrounds. The mathematics department became a model for inclusive education, actively recruiting and supporting students who traditionally faced barriers to advanced STEM coursework. Sometimes I drive past the campus and remember those late nights studying in empty classrooms, the humiliation of being told I didn't belong, the terror of filing a complaint against a powerful professor. But mostly I remember the moment Dean Martinez told me that my voice had been heard, my evidence had been believed, and my courage had created change that would protect future students. The janitor who dared to solve equations had become something more powerful. A student who refused to accept that intelligence and potential could be limited by someone else's prejudices about who deserves to learn. And in the end, that mathematical proof was more elegant than any equation I'd ever solved. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.